Hello and welcome back to Skeptics and Seekers. I'm Dale, representing the Christian or Seeker side.
And I'm David, the Skeptic.
Excellent. And today we're going back to our usual format with David here, and we're going to be discussing part 2 of my argument from Messianic Prophecies. So if you remember last time, a couple weeks back, me and David discussed the virgin birth prophecy in Isaiah chapter.
Excuse me, before you get into that, I know, yeah, there's an announcement or two. And look, we're rusty. We haven't done this in a little bit.
So. All right, let me make a first announcement about, if you don't mind. So, I've been promising for so long that I was able to bring on a couple of Christian bigwigs. So I know that David already made the announcement in terms of Gary Habermas. So I'll let David explain that. But the other mystery guest who's also agreed to come on our show, in large part due to the way we respectfully treated Barry Schwartz during the interview with Andrew and David. So kudos to you guys. It's going to be Mike Licona. Yeah, I can't wait for those shows. It's going to be awesome. These guys were very helpful to me in coming to faith, and dealing with arguments and answering my questions over the past few years. Okay, perfect. Because it's been a couple weeks since I wrote this, so I've kind of lost track a little bit. Both David and I have sort of forgotten what we wanted to say when we were fully prepared. So
I've forgotten more than you ever knew.
Yep. So I would strongly recommend that everyone read the blogs, see what we have to say, because I've given, in the first part, I wanted to sort of re-clarify my argument, because I promised Sarah, Brian, and Darren that I would answer some of their questions. So here's the one that I can remember, but the others will be answered in re-clarifying the argument. So some people have said, look, claims are fine, right? Like anyone can make claims. I can claim to have been virgin born or that sort of thing. So that my circumstantial argument from Messianic Prophecies is totally invalid. But David gave a response. So it's not just unqualified claims that I'm talking about. I'm talking about unfalsified claims. So again, that's pretty easy, but there is that qualifier there. I can falsify that I was virgin born, and that sort of thing. So yeah, just the argument hinges on unfalsified.
How can you falsify that you were virgin born?
I have eyewitnesses testimony that my mom was not a virgin when I was conceived.
Okay, I mean, people lie. People lie about this stuff. I'm just saying.
What?
People lie about this stuff.
Yeah, but there's still evidence on a balance of probabilities, I would say. I mean,
on a balance of probabilities, there's no such thing as virgin birth. So if you're going with a balance of probabilities, you lose already. So, if you're allowing a miracle into it, I mean, you could have been miracled.
Yeah, but then my mom is an eyewitness saying, look, I wasn't a virgin at the time.
Well, maybe she has her reasons to not tell you the truth about that.
Okay, yeah, so then you have to go with the evidence of, do you believe her eyewitness testimony or not? Is she credible?
No, I do not. I believe that you were the product of a virgin birth. Okay,
great. Thank you very much. I'm saying it's I'm saying it's falsified. And so anyways, the point that David's raising, sure, there could be other people where it can't be falsified if they're making claims. I don't claim to be the Messiah. I don't claim that I was virgin born. So I had a witty thing in here about my own story. So for example, with the Isaiah 7:14 thing, so I'm happy to go with even David's qualifier of it doesn't even have to be supernatural, but it's a momentous event accompanying this birth. I could not make a claim to this, or it would be falsified. The only thing that happened when I was born is my dad got so nervous he put his underwear on backwards instead of frontwards. I don't think that's the momentous sign that Isaiah had in mind. So I hope that sort of clarifies a little bit as to what the argument is.
So I also, jumping in again, I just want to push back on that too, because I don't think that we can know, and I think I made this point the last time, but I don't think that we can know what someone thought a momentous sign would be. I mean, you may not think of it as a momentous sign, but they might. I mean, they might say, well, he put his underwear on every day of his life forward, and this time he put it on backwards. That's a momentous sign. You have no idea.
Okay, so here's the point, though. It's a momentous sign for the people that the Messiah would come to. So that's relative to the time at which it comes. Maybe things that were momentous to them, it would have signified to them that this is the Messiah. That's great. Things that we don't think are momentous today. Likewise, if the Messiah is coming today, because I haven't specified the time yet, if he's coming today, then the momentous sign would have to take something that would be momentous for us today, some kind of supernatural thing. So it's relative.
But if your momentous sign is something like the virgin birth, they didn't know about the virgin birth then. I mean, the virgin birth is something that generations later talked about, but at the time nobody was buzzing around about a virgin birth. It seems like Paul didn't even know about a virgin birth, so even later than that. So if you're thinking the virgin birth is the momentous sign, that doesn't qualify either.
Well, first of all, that's not true, but that's not. I don't need to prove anything, right? I'm just saying there are these unfalsified claims. Can you prove Jesus made a claim? The Jesus of Christianity is claimed to have been born of a virgin. King Herod knew all about that, sent the innocents and that sort of thing, and that claim is unfalsified.
I don't think that King Herod knew that Jesus was supposedly born of a virgin. In fact, I don't know that there's anything in the Bible that suggests that anyone knew that outside of Mary.
Can you prove that Jesus was not born of a virgin?
No, but I can't.
Okay,
but you can't prove that
you
can't prove that anyone knew of this virgin story. And what I'm saying is, for that to be a part of your momentous sign thing, that would have had to be pretty broadly known. If Jesus' birth was a part of the momentous sign that was supposed to mean something to the people at the time, then the people at the time would have had to know about it. And they didn't.
Yep, and they did. The Bible says they knew about it. People knew about it. So it was a sign to the house of David. It came through, and Jews.
Who knew about it? Who knew about the virgin birth?
All the shepherds.
Did the shepherds know that it was a virgin birth, or did they just know it was a birth?
They knew there was a momentous birth. And King Herod knew that too. That's why he goes and slaughters the innocents.
Okay, maybe, but none of that was a virgin birth. They were saying a new king was born.
My argument is that it's a momentous birth, right? Remember I said I can't prove.
Okay, so what was momentous about it for them? This is you keep saying that it's momentous. What was momentous about the birth of Jesus that anybody knew about?
They knew that God, it was a supernatural sign. There was the Star of Bethlehem, and the Messiah was being born as the royal king.
Okay, I will give you the star.
Okay.
I would say that the star might qualify. I would question why so few people knew about the star. But that seems like a silly story plot line to me. But I would give you that. I would not give you the virgin birth because nobody knew about the virgin birth.
Okay, cool. All I need is the star.
Okay.
That's fine. So let's move on.
Then all I need to attack is the star, just so that we're establishing future lines here. Go ahead.
Well, we're not going back to the virgin birth, right? I've got my next case.
Sure. Well, I mean, we've got three more episodes of this show to go. So yeah, I'm laying down some groundwork that your virgin birth nonsense is not going to fly. So if you plan to go back to that, it's going to be a dead end. If you don't plan to go to that, that's fine. But anyone listening, you had better have something better than the virgin birth if you're going to interact with me in context in the comments. That cannot be the momentous sign, and that is the thing that most Christians say was the sign. So,
well, no, it could be the sign. You can't rule that out. Can you falsify that the virgin birth happened and that was seen as a momentous sign?
But I can falsify that people didn't broadly know about it, and therefore it couldn't have been a momentous sign. So, at any rate, I don't want to get too stuck there, but because you've mentioned the virgin birth before here, and I wanted to just digging a claim, that's not going to work for the momentous sign. And in fact, hopefully what some of this pushback will allow the listener to recognize is just how slippery this criteria of momentous sign really is in terms of prophecy. Because that's the kind of language that fills all prophecy. Oh, it's going to be momentous. Well, you know what? That could be anything. And so we don't really have...
Well, not anything.
We don't. Well, no, it really almost can. So we don't have a prophecy point just by saying, they said it was a momentous sign, because you can post hoc rationalize anything after the fact and say, oh, that was momentous. You have no idea what they were talking about. It was very vague and very spooky, and then you get a thing, and then you post hoc rationalize it as the momentous sign.
Okay, so the House of David, it was a momentous sign because Jews knew about it. You can't falsify that, right? And this is what the House of David is. It's a representation of the nation of Israel as a whole. So that's how I would establish that. Yeah, that the momentous part is rather broad. So let's try and narrow it down a little bit more. So the first prophecy in this part is rather straightforward. Nobody really denies. It comes from Jeremiah chapter 31, verses 31 to 34.
So can I ask you to hold that one back and make your next point, because I want to live in Jeremiah for a while, and if you've got some other points that could make sense before, I'd like to come back to Jeremiah, because we both want to use Jeremiah.
Okay, so the other one is not going to get a full defense here, but it's Isaiah 49, verse 6. And this is that the Messiah will serve as a light to the Gentiles, and should represent God's salvation to the ends of the earth. Yep, Jesus, check. Jesus was a light to the Gentiles and continues to be a light of the Gentiles and is bringing salvation to the ends of the earth.
Okay, let me question that. A light. What do you mean by a light to the Gentiles?
He's bringing God's word to them, and they're being saved.
So did Mahatma Gandhi.
Bring the light to the... Okay, so there are other people, but this is supposed to be a Jewish
Martin Luther
person,
King,
right? If you read...
Well, I'm just saying, this whole... He brought light to the Gentiles. This is extremely poetic language, and extremely non-specific.
Sure.
I don't even know what you mean by he brought light to the Gentiles, let alone what the original writer meant by it.
Well, it seems pretty...
It seems obvious. Look, if you come from a Christian context. You can't use your Christian context to say that it's obvious.
Well, sure.
It wasn't even obvious to the Jews who read it. I don't see how it's obvious to you.
Okay, so look, it was actually obvious to the Jews. They're bringing a light to the Gentiles, that you should be my salvation and bring my salvation to the ends of the earth.
Okay, but the Jews thought that they were doing that. They thought they were doing that long before
Correct.
Jesus.
Yeah, and that's the counter response that I'm not going to be able to get into, because I want to save that for Isaiah 53. Okay. Jews will interpret this as, look, the servant that they're talking about isn't a person, it's the nation of Israel, or it's a righteous remnant within Israel, and that's who's going to bring the light to the Gentiles. There are also... Let
me just kind of get... This is very frustrating. So this is an argument that I'm not going to be able to make now, and we'll have to wait for next week to make this argument. But the fact of the matter is, take the prophecy out of it for a moment. The Jews thought that they were a light to the Gentiles anyway, long before this. When Moses first... brought the word that you will be a nation of priests, they thought that they were a light to the Gentiles. So this wasn't something new that came with this prophecy. And so to then look at this and say, well, this clearly means Jesus. No, it didn't. Jews would not have read it that way, because they have been, as far as they're concerned, a nation of priests to the nations since their beginning.
So no, that's not true. Did Jews believe that salvation had been brought to the ends of the earth at the time of this prophecy?
Well, I think that they thought it was part of their mission to do so. It was part of,
yeah.
And so, yeah, it doesn't matter whether it had been completed, and I think that we're going to get into that with the Jeremiah conversation. Whether it had been completed is irrelevant. Whether it had been started through them is what's relevant, and that's how they would have seen it.
Okay. But by the same token, so that's why I need to, next time we do this, when we're getting into hardcore Isaiah 53, we'll find out if it is actually talking about the Messiah versus the nation of Kohanim, which is Hebrew for priests. So, okay, yep, that's a fair counter. But at the very least, at this point, it could be these other candidates, or it could be Jesus.
And it could
Jesus
be anything.
Also has.
That's my point. Yes, almost anything. You have yet to narrow down what a light to the Gentiles actually has to be. And the reason you haven't narrowed it down is because you can't. It's very poetic language that doesn't mean anything specifically.
It means bringing salvation to the ends of the earth. Whatever.
What was salvation to them? What did salvation mean to the Jews?
Doesn't matter. We have the Christian understanding of salvation.
Well, no, because they didn't have the Christian understanding of salvation. What did salvation mean to them? If they're reading this prophecy, if they're hearing this prophecy for the first time, what does that mean? It doesn't mean the same thing to them as it means to you as a Christian. And you can't just overlay your Christian view on it.
No, but we can read in the context. We know what it meant for Jews. There's no doubt. It's establishing God's kingdom over all of the earth. Jesus claimed to do that. So yes, it's a wide. Could be rather wide, but it is eliminative. Gandhi can't be considered under part of this. He wasn't Jewish.
Jesus wasn't of the house of David.
Okay, so you're interrupting me. So okay.
Well, no, I mean, I'm just trying to, I understand you throw out my Gandhi, but I can throw out your Jesus anytime. Okay, I'm actually being nice by holding back some of the arguments because it's not my turn to make the counter arguments. But I don't know how else to have this conversation.
Okay, good. So we'll get into, before I get into Zechariah and Jeremiah. So, yep, what David's doing here is valid. This is what he's doing in his, where the heck is it? This is what he's doing. Here it is. So this is what he's doing in his blog. And I said, please read the blog. So how can you defeat my circumstantial argument? There are at least 3 to 4 ways that I've thought of. So the first one that I can think of is, okay, you attack the positive indications, as David's sort of done, that either the prophecy as I'm interpreting it under this minimal requirements is wrong, or that somehow the fulfillment of that has been falsified. The second way, which is what David's doing here, is by offering counter Messianic prophecies that apart from the prophecy we're talking about. So, it's another Messianic prophecy that, you have to be of the house of David, a son of David. And David's saying, no, Jesus isn't. And I'm going to give him a chance to explain why, because I've come up with a refutation of this. And then the third way is, once I've presented all of my case, pretend I established this circumstantial argument, all you have to do is point and say, look, here's another guy. It's not Jesus or bust, it's Jesus John or bust, or Jesus Bob or bust. You do that, and my argument is destroyed on this circumstantial front. So in terms of the sons of David, what do you mean by that, David?
Very simple, and this is one of the things in the blog. I do encourage people to read the blogs at skepticsandseekers.wordpress.com. Rabbi Simmons, I brought up a blog post from a rabbi who talks about these issues in detail, and my side of the argument was let the Jews speak for themselves. And so I brought up Rabbi Shraga Simmons in his article, Why Jews Don't Believe in Jesus. The link is in the post. And one of the things that he mentioned is that by the way Jews count it, Jesus was not part of the line of David, at least not if you're tracing it with the genealogy that you get in Matthew. And the reason is because Jesus does not have a male parent. And so he, you can say, well, but it goes through the female line. The Jews didn't trace it that way, and they would not have recognized Jesus' claim as going through the female line. So I think I know how what Dale will say next, because we have talked about this off mic. So this is we're not mind readers. We've had some discussion, but I do want to let Dale speak for himself.
Just a heads up. My response is different because I did a little research.
Okay, that's fine. I will let you make your response because your last response wasn't very good. So do you mind if I let people know what your last response is, just in case there's some thinking that? So Dale's response before was, but he was adopted by Joseph, and so being adopted was pretty much the same thing. And whereas I agree with Dale that an adopted child had the rights and privileges of a child, in this case we're talking about prophecy, where it's actually talking about the seed going down through the generations. That is not something that can be adopted. And so Jesus was not of the seed of David, or if he was, there's no way to trace it via the genealogies of Matthew and Luke. So
cool. Yeah. All right. Cool. So basically, David's, in a nutshell, he's saying, look, pretend Jesus is virgin born, right? He's an incarnation. He's not a son out of Joseph's loins biologically. So therefore, via the way that ancient Jews counted inheritance through the male, not through the mother, this disqualifies Jesus as being a son of David. This falsifies that this counter prophecy falsifies that Jesus can be a messianic candidate. And I did look into this. So here's the thing. First of all, so one thing that David always does is he's always going to modern Judaism as though that's representative of what I call biblical Judaism. And he's saying, look, the modern Jews don't accept this, so therefore we should always just go with what they say. So in the first place, it's interesting that modern Jews, actually, you're not Jewish. You're considered Jewish through the female, not through the male. So if you want to go by modern Jews, that supports me. But anyways, here's a quote just in general with the problem that I see with David's approach of, well, modern Jews reject this, so they're the authority on what these prophecies mean. So I'm quoting here Talmud professor Dr. Eliezer Diamond. He says, look, in the history of the Jewish people, he's not a Christian, he's secular, right? So in the history of the Jewish people, the period of rabbinic Judaism was one of incredible transformation. If an Israelite of the first temple period, 1586 BC, were to be transported to the late 2nd century AD, he would find a form of Judaism almost unrecognizable to him. In the place of the temple, he would find a course. So he's going on about the differences. So yeah, that's the point. Just to cut it off, is he would find a form of Judaism completely unrecognizable to him. Rabbinic Judaism, of which modern Judaism derives, is not necessarily the same as biblical Judaism. And I have a quote by Jacob Neusser, who's a prolific scholar of Judaism. He's saying much the same thing. So it's not the case that we should just go, well, modern Jews say this, say that their text means this, therefore that's the preferred default kind of thing compared to Christians who are the aberration. But how do I respond to this claim through the ancients? David is just wrong. It's not true that inheritance could not go through a woman. We actually have biblical examples where this happens in certain cases. For example, 1 Chronicles chapter 2 with Shushan. If you had no sons, this is also in the end of Numbers on the inheritance laws as well. If you had no sons, the genealogy would pass through the daughter. And the example in 1 Chronicles chapter 2, we know that this is the case because the daughter married an Egyptian man. Obviously, the inheritance or lines of descent would not pass through the father in that case. So we know that it passed through the daughter. So that there is ancient Jewish precedent in the Bible itself for inheritance and descent passing through the female, not the man.
Let me just cut in there because I'm not familiar with the thing that you're mentioning. So I beg the right to read it and look it up at some point. But what I just want to make sure I understand the example that you're giving, because I tried to be clear, and I may not have been. I'm not saying that inheritance couldn't pass through the woman. I'm saying in the case of a particular prophecy, it is talking about it is talking about the purity of the seminal line. This person will be the father of this person, will be the father of this person. And that seems like a little bit different thing than you will get to take over my land and have my name. You can get the birthright. So I'm not saying that they couldn't get a birthright.
That is everything included in this is everything that you're talking about. They didn't separate it like we do today in that sense. It was everything of the line of David was gone through the woman, just as it is through the man in certain contexts, and those contexts could have applied to Mary, and therefore Jesus would be considered under a Jewish understanding, a biblical Jewish understanding. To look up what I'm saying, it's 1 Chronicles chapter 2. It could pass through the woman. So the fact that Jesus is virgin born and is not biologically a son of Joseph does not discredit him as being a son of David in the eyes of ancient Jews. That's the only point I wanted to establish there. But okay. So going on to Zechariah chapter 12, verse 10, because I don't want to lose track of my positive case. So this is the next one that I wanted to do. And so Zechariah chapter 12 is basically, I'll just read it. So, and it shall come to pass in that day that I will seek to destroy all the nations that come against Jerusalem. And I will pour upon the house of David and upon the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and of supplications. And they shall look upon me, whom they have pierced. And this is God speaking. And they shall mourn for him. All of a sudden it changes. As one mourneth for his only son, and shall be in bitterness for him. And in that day there shall be a great mourning in Jerusalem, blah, blah, blah. But here's the key part. So it's saying they shall look upon me who they have pierced, and they shall mourn for him. So obviously the application to Jesus, so God is going to, in the full text of Zechariah, the context, so it's talking about the last days. Obviously this hasn't happened yet, but God himself is going to come down onto the Mount of Olives, split it in half, and in that day, Jerusalem is going to be besieged by its enemies, and they're going to realize, it's almost like they're going to realize, oh my, Jesus is God. The one that we pierced, he is Jesus, and they'll turn to him, and then they'll be delivered in the last days. So obviously this is this is talking about something that hasn't happened yet. but there's indications in there that does speak about a past event, which makes Jesus a messianic candidate here. Who is? What do you mean you pierced God, or who is this pierced one that's appearing? So that's sort of, that's my next positive argument from this.
Can I weigh in on that?
Yeah.
Okay, so first, I can't really interact with this once again. Kind of frustrating because we're not talking about this week. We're waiting for next week to talk about this. And this is part of, I think, next week's argument, even though it seems like it's a different thing. I don't think it is as different as the two chapters that follow. But that said, so God says He will come down, and God is being pierced, and they will look upon Him. So is He talking about Himself in two different persons, the first person and the second person? Is He, or the first person and third person? Is He? You say you see Jesus here, but it seems to me that you can see God's representative here when He says, "I will be pierced." Well, that doesn't mean God, Yahweh Himself. Yahweh doesn't have any flesh and blood to be pierced, but His representative could. And so, once again, when you're speaking representative language, you open the door to just about anybody then, or any grouping of people. So who is God's representative at that time? Well, the Jews would have understood themselves collectively as God's representative. So even though you're using singular pronouns, you would use that singular pronoun because it's fitting if God is saying, this is happening to me. But me being my representative, which is Legion.
Okay, so no. In this case, I'm not sure how you see this as linked to next week's discussion. Maybe I'm just misunderstanding, but yeah, no. This had a clear messianic understanding. How do we know? Because we have ancient Jewish sources in the Talmud. This comes from Sukkah 55a.
Okay, but I'm not arguing that it doesn't have messianic. That is right. I'm just saying that you are making a leap about who or what the Messiah is.
So like
simply on the basis of pronouns. And what I'm saying is the pronouns don't matter here, because it's clearly referring to God's representative on earth, and God's representative on earth could very properly, and has very properly, I believe, been interpreted as the Jewish people, who were the nation of priests, God's representative on earth.
Okay, so you're saying the proper interpretation of Him is the nation of Israel.
Yes, the singularity of the pronoun is irrelevant. This is the main thing that I want to try to get out here, and I'm certainly not alone in saying that. I'm trying to suggest that this is speaking of God's representative on earth, and God's representative on earth at that time was a plurality.
Okay, so here's why you're wrong then, and it's just obvious from reading the verse, and this is going to come into effect when we do Isaiah 53.
Which is why I said this is related to next week.
Gotcha. Okay, so yeah, look. The house of David is looking upon this person who they have pierced and mourning for him. So under your reading, it's the house of David is looking upon themselves who have been pierced, and they shall mourn for themselves. I don't think that makes sense of what's going on, especially in the overall context, right? Throughout, it's always talking about God is going to be doing these things. God the Father. Is how most Jews would have understood this text, right? When he's talking about look upon me, that's God the Father. They're thinking, right? So yeah, this is speaking of an individual. This isn't talking about a group of people, the nation of Israel or the righteous remnant. But yeah, I guess David's correct then. I see what you meant is, okay, well, we're going to get into this hardcore next time with Isaiah 53, and let's see if I can destroy this notion that it's not speaking of an individual, but a group of people.
You can't.
So okay, we'll see.
All right. Now, by the way, I just want to let anyone know who has studied this carefully. I'm actually not married to the theory. It could also be an individual. I actually don't mind making that admission. Ultimately, we don't really know. I think that it makes best sense as the nation of Israel. I have read lots of scholarly opinion on this. I used to believe exactly what Dale believes, so I don't think that Dale is crazy in this matter. This is not a BSC issue.
All right.
So, So
take that, Tara.
Just in this one narrow area, but I don't. I think that this is part of the challenge of talking about prophecy, though, that, I come back to his frustration. You ultimately don't know what it meant. Neither one of us can put a stake in the ground and, fight and die on this hill as if we had some great insider knowledge, because we don't. The knowledge ends at a certain point for everybody. And that's why there is so much debate on this stuff.
Sure. Sure. I don't know if I would go as far as you. I think we can know some things about it, but certainly it goes without question that there are interpretive issues. It's not clear cut. I think when I started this, it takes hard work and determination to kind of wade through the various interpretations. That's why it's important to look at both sides, see what the modern day Jew rabbis interpret it as, see how the Christians interpret it, see how ancient Jews interpret it, and wrestle with the text as best you can to figure out yourself. It's not like it is in Sunday school. It's not a simple, straightforward, how dumb could the Jews be type deal, for sure. I would agree with that. And going into one thing I wanted to say for Joyce's sake, because Joyce linked to, in part one, gave a good video that I highly recommend people check that out. Michael L. Brown is far more eloquent than I am in terms of presenting the case for the Messiah, and he does a much fuller case than I'm going to be able to do. But wholly apart from this objective argument that I'm trying to establish and see how it goes, the Messianic Prophecies are one of the, largely through the work of Michael L. Brown, are one of the reasons that I'm a Christian. Now, when I studied Messianic Prophecies, I realized I couldn't create an argument from fulfilled prophecy. But it was through studying these that I had a properly basic belief. This is one of the things that I included in the witness of the Holy Spirit that contributes to me becoming a Christian. So if you want to call that a spiritual experience. And Michael L. Brown in the video Joyce gives a great illustration of a picture, where an abstract picture or something, you say, I see a man with a beard or something, and they're like, no, it's actually a woman. Just tilt your head this way, and all of a sudden it all makes sense. You see the Messiah in that light. Or C.S. Lewis, I think it was, put it in the sense of, I believe in the sun not because I can see it directly, but through its light I see everything else. So wholly apart from arguments on Messianic prophecy, these were a powerful part of my own, spiritual experience through the witness of the Holy Spirit. After going through these, the Messianic prophecies are a part of why I'm a Christian, just on a subjective level, wholly apart from argument. So hopefully Tara appreciates that I'm providing that one type of thing, spiritual experience, as she calls it. But getting back into the argument proper then. Our last one is Jeremiah 31 on the new covenant. So I don't think David is going to take an issue with my interpretation here so much, though he's going into, well, is it Israel or is it a person or that, or what, or sorry, no, what does it, I don't know. No, I don't think you talked about this yet. So yeah, basically, this is saying there's going to be a new covenant, not like the covenant that was made with their fathers, talking about Moses. I will, and in this part of this new covenant, God will put the law within them and write it on their hearts. He will forgive their iniquities and remember their sins no more. This sounds an awful lot like what Jesus claims. Jesus is a messianic. Yeah, it does. I know you're going to take issue with the law within them, but that is, I do have the law.
Remembering their sins no more. Who does that refer to? All of the Jews? Because that hasn't happened. So and that doesn't sound like the message of Jesus either. I mean, so we're going to get to timing, to be sure, but the message of Jesus, I mean, this sounds like almost a universalist manifesto. And Jesus was not a universalist. He was all about some people will go to heaven and some people will go to hell.
Perfect. So David hits the nail on the head there. So yeah, this is the thing with a lot of these the way prophecy works in general, not just messianic prophecies, but this is God's MO in the Old Testament, is prophecies will come into fulfillment in part, and then the rest is said to be fulfilled either later on or yet to be fulfilled, right? Because a lot of these prophecies deal with, Israel, it's the end times. Israel's going to be the end of the age. God is going to establish his kingdom once for all. And all this good stuff, universal peace and all this stuff. That hasn't happened yet. But Jesus is bringing this to fulfillment, and we have the down payment, so to speak, because he fulfilled this in part. My sins have been forgiven. Many Jews' sins have been remembered no more by God.
Will all of them?
They will in the end of the days.
So I just want to make sure, because it's a theological message that you're making here, and I want to be clear. You believe that all Jews will be saved. Is that correct?
It's talking about in the day of the Lord, the people that are.
Will all Jews be saved? I'm trying to get a read on that.
No.
Okay, so doesn't this prophecy seem to suggest that all Jews will be saved, though?
No.
Well, maybe I misread it. Oh, all the Jews at what time?
At the time the prophecy comes to its complete fulfillment.
So all Jews who were still alive at the time of the fulfillment will be saved. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what Zechariah seems to be talking about.
Okay, so right? I just want to say that again, because that's kind of a new wrinkle. So whenever the time of the fulfillment is, all Jews still standing will be saved.
Okay.
Is that what you're saying?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Okay. But it's still being fulfilled in part. We have Jews that are being saved today throughout history, right? So, yeah, I get with the future aspect. This is going to seem like it's unfair.
It seems like a heck of a prophecy, honestly, because you schmucks standing here today, not so much. And the schmucks throughout history, not so much. But whatever day is that this prophecy is fulfilled, the guys who are standing around then, they're going to be saved. Who on earth cares? Who cares about that? Nobody would have cared about that.
Well, apparently the Jew Jeremiah did.
I'm not so sure. I don't think that's. I don't know that even that's a fair interpretation, because it just doesn't make any sense. I don't understand how that makes sense. So the fact that it does not make sense to me is not an argument. So I will quit making it. But I don't understand a prophecy that says all of the people alive at a particular day, which I will leave unspecified, they will be saved, but never mind the rest of the Jews. Sorry, I don't buy it.
Okay. That doesn't make sense to me, actually, because What about the Jews living at the time of Jeremiah? Obviously, Jeremiah knows that not all the Jews are going to be saved. That can't be what he's talking about here.
Why couldn't all the Jews be saved, though?
Because they weren't. They were sinful. They were.
The Jews standing around in Jesus' day will also be were sinful, and whenever this second coming of yours, which I think we'll get to, there will still be sinful Jews standing around. So I don't understand how that's different.
Because they would repent. They would fulfill the new covenant requirements for salvation.
Okay, then why wouldn't the dead Jews have a chance to repent?
Okay, so maybe some of them could be saved, because you're getting into the fact that I think I'm open to the fact that some people could be saved in the afterlife.
You have made this argument on air, so it seems to me that I don't understand your sudden limitation of saying, well, only the Jews who are alive on that day will certainly be saved. If the prophecy seems to be saying that all of the house of Israel is going to be saved.
That's not my reading of it.
Okay, well, this is part of the problem with prophecy, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay, but so look, I could just say, okay, great, fine. All the Jews will be saved in the afterlife then, if that's the case. However, I think the Bible makes it clear that it's not the case that all Jews will be saved. Some are the Pharisees are going to be damned.
Sure. Okay. Just certain Jews on a particular day will be saved. Well, that's a piss poor, stupid, ridiculous, BSC prophecy. It doesn't mean anything.
No, but it's also about the new covenant. That's the important part that I'm trying to say, that Jesus. What other Messianic candidates claim they brought in a new covenant? None that I'm aware of. It's
when did Jesus claim to bring in a new covenant?
In Matthew, Mark, Luke, John.
Wait. You're being general. I want to get to the specific claim that you're talking about. No. I'm not saying that there is no claim, but you're just saying that Jesus claimed to bring in a new covenant. I'm trying to zero in on what you mean. What are you thinking about?
Jesus brought in a new covenant.
No. Okay, you're just preaching Christian doctrine. When did Jesus say, I'm doing a new covenant now?
No, I'm not going to play that game.
How is that a game?
Because I don't need to prove historically that Jesus taught that he is bringing in a new covenant or something like that. Even if I could do that, it's irrelevant. All I need to do is say the Christian Jesus. This is a claim about the Christian Jesus. It's unfalsified claim. I mean, obviously it happened. We have the New Testament. But I don't need to prove it as long as it's an unfalsified.
If Jesus, but who's making the claim though?
Doesn't matter.
Well, yes, it does. Who claims that Jesus brought in a new covenant? I think that's kind of important. Because I can claim that some other Jew brought in a new covenant.
That's not important for my argument, though, right? Oh, yeah, wait, sorry. You said some other Jew brought in a new covenant.
Sure.
Okay. Name him. And once I complete my case, name this person who brought in a new covenant and did everything else that I'm trying to establish.
Okay, but I'm trying to establish that you're not really establishing anything. These are just general platitudes, like, for instance, light to the Gentiles. What does this even mean? So he brought in a new covenant. I ask you to give me what are you thinking about? You're just saying, well, Christians say he's brought in a new covenant. Well, Jews don't say that. So I think it does matter who's saying that he brought a new covenant. If now your argument would make more sense to me, and I would be able to interact with it a little bit better if you were saying Jesus said that he was going to bring in a new covenant, and this is where he said it. That way, at least you would be able to establish, at least he made the claim. It wouldn't establish that he actually did it, but you would at least be able to establish that that was a part of the claim of Jesus as Messiah. And I'm just trying to rack my brain to help you out a little bit in this argument and try to think of when Jesus made that claim. Because when people came to Jesus and asked, what should we do? He told them to fulfill the law.
Okay.
So I'm just trying to think of what you're talking about when you're saying that Jesus brought in a new covenant as a part of the claim.
you're trying to get it off track. Look, I can quote Dale Allison. There's pros and cons on this. Jesus also is claimed to by your modern Jews, these infallible guides of understanding the Bible. They say he abolished the law, right? Because Jesus didn't follow the Sabbath laws. He broke it, or fulfilled them, I would say, in letting his disciples eat on the Sabbath day, or that sort of thing. So there are verses on either side, but the point is,
well, I mean, I would say that he interpreted them, and he had his own interpretations of them. I think that Jews have been interpreting the Sabbath laws since the Sabbath laws were around. Jesus even made the point. Do you not realize what David did when David was running from Absalom and so forth? And when his men were hungry and they ate the sacred bread and so forth. Well, David wasn't establishing a new law. He was desperate and hungry, and God chose not to kill him. I wouldn't say that David established a new law simply because Jesus had some unique interpretations of the Sabbath that others in his time didn't share. It doesn't mean he established a new law. And I don't see this place, at least in my mind right now. I mean, I really am trying to help you with this argument where Jesus made any claim of establishing a new law.
Do Christians claim that there is a new covenant? Let's start there.
Sure, Christians do.
Okay. Great. When did this new covenant take effect?
You'll have to ask a Christian because they're the only ones who claim it.
Okay, so I'll tell you, it came in effect with Jesus. Jesus initiated the new covenant. So that's the unfalsified claim. It's totally uncontroversial.
Okay, well, I think it's controversial for the point that you have been trying to make so far. Now, it sounds like you may be changing horses and trying to make a different point, but you're reading this passage in Jeremiah and you're talking about someone who's going to bring a new covenant and that this must be talking about Jesus. If we can for a moment trade the word covenant for a new world order or a new religious view, lots of people have brought in new covenants.
Sure.
So I just... You speak of this as if this is clearly talking about Jesus, and I don't see Jesus in this at all. But the way you're reading it, it can be anybody. This could be anything.
So on that front, that could be a fair point. But it can't be anybody. So, for example, it could be modern rabbinic Judaism could be considered a new covenant, right? Because I remember that quote I gave from Eliezer Diamond.
Sure.
I take it you wouldn't disagree with him.
I wouldn't disagree with the quote.
Modern Jews could have made an unfalsified claim and say, "Oh, we're bringing in the new covenant like Jeremiah 31." They didn't make that claim. They could have.
Neither did Jesus. But I'm making the claim for them. Now that fits with your argument, doesn't it? I've made the claim. Does that count?
Okay.
So, like I said,
sure.
It could be it could be just about anybody. It's a very non-specific claim, and the more we talk about it, the more non-specific it gets.
No, that's fine. I'm not changing. This has always been what I said. Let's pretend you're the Jewish. First of all, you could be falsified in your claim to be the Messiah based on some of the other things we've said.
I'm not saying that I am the Messiah. I am saying that I am claiming that others have brought in a new covenant. Now, they don't have to have claimed that they brought in a new covenant. Who cares what they claim? Because you don't care what Jesus claimed. You're saying his followers said he brought in a new covenant. So I can say that someone brought in a new covenant. It's just as valid.
Yeah, cool. That's absolutely right. So that's why you got to wait and put everything combined, and let's see if you can come up with a candidate.
Okay, all right, fine. Well, I'm not going to wait for the 5-week series to be over to push back on some of this stuff. I don't think the audience wants that, and I'm not going to play that game. So I'm going to have to do some of the pushback as you're making the claims, and so I think I'm fair to do that. Yeah,
like I said, didn't I agreed with you. That's I'm not telling you you're not allowed to push back. You're absolutely right. Okay, fine. A new covenant. You could say you're the Jewish Messiah fulfilling this, or you can claim that Elijah Diamond, maybe he's the Jewish Messiah and he's bringing in this new covenant. Okay, then we can look and see if that's falsified or not. But yeah, it's
so. I know that week 4 is going to be about timing, and so I don't want to step on that too much. But so if I can make a suggestion, let's get down to let's continue with this Jeremiah passage, because I think that this gets to the heart of a lot of my objection and also to the heart of a lot of your arguments. So I want to continue down that, and so that people get a more fuller look at what this looks like. So go, if you can continue your reading.
Well, I've finished on Jeremiah. I thought we covered, because your main argument, as I see it, is you're taking issue with the partial fulfillment. That's
right, yeah. And it's the partial fulfillment. So if you would, do you still have that in front of you? Because I don't plan to read on this podcast ever again. So I would like you to
read thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
I want that reading front and center right here.
So behold, the days are coming. Meaning Jeremiah didn't think this had already come to pass, but they're coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah. Not like the covenant that I made with their fathers on the day when I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt. My covenant that they broke, though I was their husband, declares the Lord. For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, declares the Lord. I will put my law within them.
Stop. I will put my law within them. What does that mean?
It's the fulfilling Jesus fulfilled the law, and it's the Holy Spirit dwells within us. So he fulfilled.
Wait. So I just want to be specific here. So I will put my law within them means the Holy Spirit.
The Torah is been fulfilled, and it's now written within our hearts. We fulfill the spiritual intent that the law was given to the Jews in the first place.
Okay, well, that's an interesting interpretation, but I don't see that in this reading, because not everyone has the Holy Spirit, quote unquote, or has this is not a universal thing here, and what's being said here once again sounds very universal, not just to some select group of people. But here's why I think it's universal. So keep reading from there.
Okay. So I was just going to ask though about.
But it's important. It's important to get the next bit of this.
And I will be their God, and they shall be my people. And no longer shall each one teach his neighbor and each his brother, saying, Know the Lord, for they shall all know me.
Right. Okay. So again, right here, it sounds like it's talking about the same time frame as the sentence before that. But we do not have any situation where no longer does brother need to teach his neighbor and that everybody knows that he's God. That's not true even among Christians.
Yeah.
So if you say that one piece of that has been fulfilled but not the other, I think that you're treating that passage incorrectly, because that passage gives you the same time frame for both things. And what we can say with certainty is that hasn't happened. So no. Nobody fulfills that, but there's a little bit more to that too. And I don't know if it's this passage or another passage that talks about beating swords and plowshares and lions laying down with deer and that sort of thing. Once again, don't actually even know what that means, but it hasn't happened. and right. we don't see any indication of it about to happen, and it's all said within the same time frame of prophecy. So it's not like, well, a piece of this will be fulfilled now, and a piece of it will be fulfilled 1,000 years from now, and then another piece will be fulfilled 3,000 years from now. He's describing what the time looks like when the prophecy is fulfilled, period. And the time does not look like that.
So no, that's you not reading the text in a proper ancient Jewish way.
No problem. Go ahead and correct me and show me where I'm wrong.
So in the first place, about it all being all the Jews, obviously that behold the days are coming, meaning they haven't already come or they are not in the past. So obviously Jews that had died before Jeremiah made this prophecy would not have been included in this. They'll all know me and that sort of thing. So that part doesn't make sense. But as for the partial fulfillment, as I said, this is established. Biblical scholars on both sides, they all recognize that this is the way it works. There is this partial fulfillment. It's called prophetic telescoping, right? So there's the partial.
I'm familiar with the term. I don't buy it.
Okay.
What you mean by prophetic telescoping, just so the audience understands, is, this prophecy says this thing, and it seems like this person fulfilled the first part of it, but not the second part. But we don't have to say that person doesn't fulfill the prophecy. It's just that the rest of it hasn't been fulfilled. Stay tuned. This person is the fulfillment of the prophecy. He's just the fulfillment of the first piece of it. So in that way, you never have to admit that your prophecy failed, because you can always just kick it down the road a little bit for the rest of the telescope.
Sure. And let me sort of support David here, but also clarify, because look, the point that David's making isn't relevant for my argument. He doesn't realize this, but this is the issue this is one of the strains. This is why I don't think I can establish an argument from fulfilled prophecy proper, like these techniques, prophetic telescoping or double fulfillment and these sort of things do, to the mind of a skeptic, even to my mind, appear ad hoc or strained at times. And that's why I don't try to make an argument from fulfilled Messianic prophecy proper. But with my circumstantial argument, that's entirely beside the point. Look, we have this unfalsified claim, and this isn't just me. This has been from ancient times. I didn't look this up, so I can't give the reference. But there is an ancient Jewish thing in the time of Jesus, around the early 2nd century, where some Greek is mocking the Jews, saying, "Where's your Messiah? He was supposed to come before the destruction of the Second Temple," and all this and this stuff, right? So how does the Jew respond? And he takes 3 lengths of rope, and he says, "Look, there. First, we had the time of Adam or Noah, so the time from Adam up to Moses." They think in terms of eras or ages, not dispensationalists. Oh, there's a day of judgment at the end of the world, and that's it. No. So there's that era of that. Then there's the era, 2,000 years of the era of Torah. So each of the ropes, the 3 ropes, represents 2,000 years in the era. Now we're in the Messianic era, thinking it's 2,000 years or whatever, right? So that started right before the Second Temple came, right when it was supposed to, and it's going to be ushered in. Christians say the exact same thing. The only difference is they say, no, but the Messiah actually came. It wasn't just the Messianic era was inaugurated before the Second Temple. It was the Messiah came in the first coming and initiated the Messianic era, and he'll come at the end of the Messianic era with the second coming. So this is precedented in ancient Jewish understandings. It's not, we take it, the day of the Lord refers to a specific day when Jesus will come. No, in the biblical understanding, it's referring to an era. We're in the Messianic era that was initiated with Jesus' first coming and will end whenever. It doesn't have to be 2,000 years. That was just the ancient Jewish understanding.
Let me just cut in here, because
Sure.
I think you failed to see my objection, or at least all of it. I'm not saying that the Jews have not used these tools for thousands of years.
Okay.
It's all BS. Everyone who uses prophecy has some kind of get out of jail free card that allows them to say, "Oh no, we weren't wrong." And that's all I'm saying. This is just one of those tools, one of those get out of jail free cards that people have been using for a long time, so that they can say we're not wrong. But the skeptical, I would say the rational person looking at how this is parsed by the people presenting these prophecies should be out at this point. and recognize the game that's being played. This is not an honest game. It's not a scientific endeavor. It's not even trying to read the literature accurately. If you're reading the literature, they envisioned a thing that didn't happen, period, close the book. Now, you can say all you want, but it's going to. Pieces of it's happened, but it's going to. It'll happen, give it another, in the indefinite course of time, everything's going to happen. Well, if that's what you mean by fulfilled prophecy, I don't want to have the other 3 weeks.
Okay,
it's ridiculous.
So understand my argument then. My argument's different, right? You're saying take the bust option, Jesus or bust. This is the circumstantial argument that I'm making. You're saying the skeptic should go for the bust. As a Christian, I would obviously say no, take the Jesus option. Doesn't matter. Which the circumstance that I'm basing my argument is the fact that we have to go Jesus or bust.
No, but we're not even going to be able to talk about that until week 4 when we talk about the timing, because all I have to do to defeat Jesus or bust is say, but he hasn't come yet. And by the way, that's what the Jews say, whether they're thinking about a he or the Jewish nation. They simply say it hasn't come yet. Yeah. And there's nothing to suggest that all of these things can't be fulfilled 2,000 years from now. Now, you think that there are some things that keep it from being fulfilled 2,000 years from now, but we're not going to get to that until week 4.
Yeah.
So I don't.
So that's a good point, David. Again, that's the final way to refute my argument is pretend I don't have this timing element, then bada boom, bada bing. David can just say, well, it's some future Jew. This is what the modern day Jews do. And I couldn't establish, it would be Jesus, unlimited number of future Jews, or bust. My argument would fail. I'm trying to get it, no, just Jesus or bust. Those are the only 2 options.
Right, and all I'm saying is you have not said anything so far that gets us there.
Sure, yeah, because there are future... unlimited number of future potential candidates. So yeah, I will agree that I haven't gotten you thus far, but when we get to part 4, that's going to be my attempt to show the Messiah had to come, at least in part, before the second temple was destroyed. So yeah, are you happy? I think I've covered.
Yeah, sure, that's fine. I think we've covered all that we can cover today and not bleed into future weeks. And by the way, just for the person following along here, I actually don't care if you claim victory on your argument if the answer is bust, because I still contend couldn't have been Jesus. In fact, I think I've already made enough argument right now to say, well, it couldn't have been Jesus. I actually don't care whether it's bust. I think it's bust anyway. I think it's prophetic nonsense.
Okay, so let me ask this then, because I think this will be interesting for the audience. But I get that right now you lean towards the bust, but what I'm trying to say is,
well, I've made a case that gets us there. I think my case for bust is better than your case for Jesus. I'm not saying, well, I dismissed it and waved my arms, and so no. I think to the extent that we can make cases in this format, right now I've made more of a case for bust than you have for Jesus.
Okay, but my case will be, if I can establish to your satisfaction that it is in fact Jesus or bust, would that circumstance in and of itself do anything to push you in the direction of the Jesus as opposed to the bust option? Or is it just like, is my argument, do you find the fact that I can establish it's Jesus or bust, does that signify anything to you, or is that just meaningless? Oh, it's just a coincidence. It just happens to be that it's Jesus.
No, it's meaningless. But I appreciate the question. Let me try to answer why I think it's meaningless, because it may not be meaningless to some of the audience. So, but let's say that the Christians were familiar with Messianic Prophecy. And the Christians, who, by the way, were Jews, even though they weren't necessarily Orthodox Jews. By the way, the quote that you read about modern Jews being different than ancient Jews, that could have been read in Jesus' time, because those Jews were different than the Jews of Moses' time. So that's
And that was my point, is we can't just blindly say, oh well, the modern day Jews, their interpretation must be real.
There's no monolithic Jew here.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can say that some Jews had an idea of Messianic prophecy. And they were motivated to come up with some story that showed the prophecies fulfilled, as opposed to showing them being a bunch of bunk. So they wrote a story and made up some things that makes it look like it was fulfilled by someone. Now, we can say that. I don't have to prove it, but we can, for this point here, we can just say that is the case, and that they were the only people in history who were motivated to see the prophecy fulfilled in that way. Well, just because they were the only ones motivated to make up the right story and fulfill the prophecy in that way, and let's call our prophecy fulfiller Jesus, that's not particularly interesting to me, because I can take any ancient prophecy that you say hasn't been fulfilled, and I can make up a story and show that it's been fulfilled. And I might be the only person who took the time to make sure that prophecy was fulfilled in that way. Well, that's not miraculous. I'm just the only one who cared about that bit of literature, or who had that particular religious idea and created a fulfillment. So no, right. There's nothing miraculous about Jesus being the only one who fulfills that prophecy if he turns out to be the case. I don't actually think that's the case, but if you were right, and Jesus is the only one who could fulfill that prophecy, that's still not very interesting.
Okay, so let me say this, because I'll give you an advance on what my conclusion, when I finish all of this, I was going to write a conclusion when we finish the 5 parts. And what I was going to say is, assuming my case was successful, was going to say, look, at the end of the day, I think all I've proven is that we have a good structural foundation for an argument for a G-belief authenticating event. But given, obviously, the obvious limitations of doing a podcast, having to select certain things, all I've done is proven that there needs to be a fuller investigation, because you do need to look at all of the counter. It's not enough just to select certain ones or certain counter prophecies. That's not enough for a full understanding. This is just going to be a start. And then you need to branch out and do all of the investigation. And then once you have actually established the Messiah has to do these certain things, and there are no counter prophecies against him being a Messianic candidate, and none of the claims are falsified that he is the Messiah in terms of fulfilling them, and there's nobody else. It's not Jesus Bob or bust, Jesus John or bust, it's just Jesus or bust. Then you have a chance. So I already know, even when I get to the end of this, it's not going to be satisfactory to say I've got a G-belief authenticating event. But what I'm hoping to do is establish, look, we have a foundation here. There's something here that requires maybe more research, and that's going to be my end hope. Sorry to give my conclusion before I even get there, but that's what I'm thinking. That's where I'm leaning to try to establish. That's what I think I'm going to be able to do.
Okay. Well, that's fine. I think we could jump straight to the conclusion and say we need to do more research. But the research that you've given me so far, and once again, I want the audience. I'm talking around you right now. Okay. I want the audience to understand that I am not dismissing anything that Dale has said out of hand. I have looked at the things that Dale has said. I have presented counters to the things that Dale has said to the extent that this format will allow. I will present more counters fully in the week that I have to do that, and so I will. I've tried to present some pushback and counters to the claims up front, and I don't think that Dale has, in fact, dealt with those yet to make me go back to the drawing board, because I think that already, I have hinted at a couple of places where Jesus could not possibly be the guy. And if you interpret that, in a a certain kind of way, then you can say, well, Jesus is the guy. But that's when I jump in and say, well, then if Jesus can be the guy, anybody can be the guy. And that prophecy is too non-specific to mean anything. So, but I think that we will be able to round this off a little bit better in week 4 when Dale gets into the part where he says, but it couldn't be any future people because the timing precludes that possibility. And so I will not try to make that counter argument until Dale makes an argument.
Yeah, I know you don't. You like it all at once, kind of thing. But just
Well, I mean, it's hard to argue against a point that hasn't been made.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that, but there's just I don't see any way around it when there's just so much to like. There's no way I could do a thing in one thing and do it justice.
I get it. So I mean, we're doing the best we can. I think that the people who are following along appreciate what they see. Just understand why some of my responses look the way they do. I can't get into. There's only so much of countering arguments that haven't been made that I'm willing to do.
Well, let me say that. Would you like? I wanted to do Isaiah 53, but would you prefer that I just skip that and just go into the dating, the timing, and then you can do the counters, like reduce it to 4 then, or?
Well, Isaiah 53 is such an important piece, though, isn't it? I mean, I think that if we did that, and maybe we can hear from the listeners a little bit, but yeah. I think that anyone who cares about this series would say, but you missed the big one.
I know.
Right? So
that's why I'm like, I can't.
I don't think that we can do that. But just understand why we're playing footsie with the quote unquote big one. It still is not going to advance the point. So we're going to end next week exactly where we're ending this week, waiting for week 4. So that's the frustration there. We can talk about whether it means a singular person or a plural person until we're blue in the face. It still doesn't get you to Jesus.
Well, I'm going to be saying it gives you a resurrection of an individual, of the Messiah. So like a death and resurrection. So that adds a new layer.
It does. It doesn't add the layer as big a layer as you think, though, because some Jews believed in resurrection and other Jews didn't. And so what a lot of them called resurrection, we would call reincarnation. So you remember Jesus, they thought he was Elijah. Come back from the dead, or John the Baptist, or they would have been fine with those types of explanations.
No.
I mean, you wouldn't be fine with it, but I think they would have. So the fact of the matter is, I don't think resurrection gets you as far down on the road as you think that it will.
Okay. All right. Cool. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Read the blogs, folks. Don't ignore that. There's a lot of good stuff.
Our best stuff is in the blogs.
Yeah. This stuff, the audio is just me and David tiredly on a Saturday morning saying stuff.
So with that, I'm gonna say have a great week, and we'll come back and tackle Isaiah 53. It's not the part that's most interesting to me. I actually think today's discussion is more interesting than next week's discussion will be. I think that a lot of people think that Isaiah 53 gives them a lot more mileage than it does, and so mostly my time next week will be pointing out, that could mean this other 3 things as well. And also pointing out here's a preview. I will give you the balance of scholarship where most Jews are and many Christians are, who would interpret it very differently from the way Dale seems to be prepared to interpret it right now. So Dale wants to present you a case that looks like, oh no, this is clearly what this meant. And even today, even among Christians, it is not clearly what that meant.
All right, cool. Yeah, looking forward to it.
All right. Ciao.
All right. Have a great day, everyone.